So you ever wake up in the morning and just want to choose violence? I mean, I don't recommend it, but if you do, then stick around, because we're going to be talking about pro-choice versus pro-life in an objective manner, and that could lead to a lot of problems. Because if you know anything about these types of topics, that generally opinions are anything but objective. But that's the fun part. We're going to find that little middle ground. We're going to look at both sides of the argument, and we're going to come up with an objective opinion, so to speak. But before we go too far into this, let me just say that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and none shall be told theirs is wrong. I only claim to be objective, and you can do with that information whatever you like. So let's begin. What is pro-choice versus pro-life for those people who have lived under a rock or just have parents that decided never to teach them what the heck any of this is? Pro-life is to say that a woman has a right to terminate a pregnancy only under a couple conditions. The first of which is if their pregnancy is coming to term and the mother might pass away, right? It's a situation where you can lose the mother or the baby. The person has a right to make the decision, whether it's the partner or family member. They have the right to choose the mother, right? It's not like, sorry, you choose pro-life, which means it's a baby choice, no matter what. Under laws that follow pro-life, you still have the right to make the decision. Another situation is when there's non-consensual circumstances that lead to the conception of the child. And at first I didn't think it actually worked that way, but my research led me to find that pro-life do believe if you have non-consensual, not safe for YouTube words that lead to a birth, not birth, that's the word I'm looking for, leads to the pregnancy, then you can have an abortion. And actually, none of these words might even be YouTube friendly, but I'm going to continue anyways. And so then there's the other side of the argument, pro-choice, and that's the one that's more freeform. And it's when women do have the right to terminate a pregnancy in many, if not all situations. They just have to want to, generally speaking. If they have a desire to not carry the child to term, they can use any of the legal methods that are available. Plan B, abortion, from surgical perspectives. I mean, that's how I'm differentiating them. And you can use all of the means and the previous ones for pro-life. You're not barred from saying, using the life or death scenario in pro-choice because pro-life took it. It's not like we got it first. No, if this happens, you just must always kill the baby. No, that's not a situation that you live in the realm of pro-choice. It's just in all situations you have more leniency and you have the ability to switch and choose. Hey, I prefer pro-choice, but that doesn't mean I want to die. Right? Or that doesn't mean that I want my baby to die. They could choose in those situations, no, let me pass, let my child be born. And that's still, their right. It's not taking away their abilities. Anyways, I'm digressing a bit too much, and I wrote down a couple things to be a more succinct definition of the two. So first, pro-life. A pregnant woman should not have the right to willingly terminate a pregnancy, regardless of how the pregnancy came to be. The only exception is when the pregnancy endangers the life of the woman, or when the conception is non-consensual. In the definition that I'm working with for pro-choice, is supporting the idea that women should have the right to terminate pregnancy in the event that they do not want to have a child. And a little side note off of that, when I was finding the definitions for these, the point that I want to really hone in on for just a second is the if they don't want to have a child portion. Because though this doesn't create any, like, conflict of interest, it does subtly imply a world where if the mother didn't want to have an abortion, they couldn't. But, like, this would be only in a situation where they want the child. So it's like, if you want to carry the child to term, you can't have an abortion. I don't know in what world that would ever be a problem, but it's just technically a stipulation. And it's kind of weird, but I'm digressing too much. So, with those definitions outlined, now we have to figure out what it means to be objective. We can't just say one thing and then reach a conclusion and not actually say what we're basing the objectivity upon. Because in this like little outline, what does that even mean, right? We have to have a basis of fact, or some basis to base our facts off of, to lead to something that's subjective. Because if we don't have a ground to stand on, then what are we going to base it off of? You can't have a building without a foundation. Because let's just say we have a surface level argument, right? And we claim that on the base level of necessity, we need births to come to term, and we go no further than just saying pro-choice leads to less full-term pregnancies, meaning, therefore, pro-choice is a bad answer, right? Right? Exactly. Emotions, that's not factual. Emotions, they don't lead to truth. You ever have someone be like, I'm emotionally unstable, and then spit actual facts? No, doesn't happen. So therefore, we can just stop the argument and just say that the only thing we can get from all of this is that pro-choice is wrong, and based on fact, pro-life is the right answer. And let's just end it here, right? Flame wars in the comments. I will not be taking questions. I'm done. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Don't reprimand me yet. You'll still have reason, most likely. At least like 50% of the people, probably. I think it's a pretty like polarizing topic where you'll have like 50-50. So many people still have reason to reprimand me after this. But wait, let me give you some more ammo first. Because like the concepts aren't so simple, right? We aren't just so base level, and population hasn't been an issue for quite a long time when it comes to people, especially considering that abortions are around right now, and like the total number of people on the world has still been increasing. So let's go ahead and do a little justice to the argument and say that population isn't going to be an issue, and we're going to just delve into the definitions of both sides of the argument, and once they're defined, then we'll go further into what we're going to have the basis of the actual opinion, the objective opinion. That'll be the closing point of the video. So, since we dived into a little bit of pro-choice, I'm going to talk about pro-life. Just because I want to spice it up a little bit. Just a little spicy. So, let's go into anatomy, right? Let's get a little timeline, pregnancies, figure out life, because the big argument that hinges on both sides and creates the rift between people comes down to morals and life, in my research and what people bring up for arguments. So we're going to have to talk about anatomy for a little bit. And we're going to go through a timeline. And you're going to learn that conception is technically week 2, as the previous period is the beginning of a 40-week pregnancy. Fun fact. So, the egg has been fertilized, and 36 hours after this, the first cell has split, leading to a zygote, which will reach a total of 16 cells by day 17, and by day 19, the zygote has made its way to the womb. By the end of week 3, it's become a blastocyst. I think it's a fun word. Just a little side note. Having burrowed into the uterine lining. Onto week 4, the blastocyst expands expands, and continues cell division, forming the beginning of different bodily systems, organs, and the like. Much to some people's surprise, I say, I don't actually know how many people are surprised by this, it just kind of surprised me, that we've already stepped beyond the definition of life at this point. To quote a Mr. O'Reilly, I just say that it sounds like he's probably Irish, Scottish, just by the spelling of it. So I probably butchers his name. I'm going to continue to butcher his name, and I'm going to continue to butcher the definition or the pronunciation of the different words in this quote of his. It says, "The procession of events that begins when a spermatozoon makes contact with a secondary oocyte or its investments and ends with the intermingling of material of maternal and paternal chromosomes at metaphase of one of the first mitotic divisions of the zygote. The zygote is a characteristic of the last phase of fertilization and is identified by the first cleavage spindle. It is a unicellular embryo." Emphasis on the word embryo per quote. I messed that up, but it's okay. It's fine. We don't really care too much. It's minor mistakes. I'm not the best at reading, okay? So, put simply, if those words are just kind of fancy words and I have no idea what the heck it meant, even though I kind of did a little bit of fixing up there, it basically states that once the sperm makes contact with the egg, got one part, two part, once they become together, not even so much fused, right? Just once they come in contact with each other, even before cell division to become the zygote, they are alive. That is what life is, right? It's not the proceedings. It's not what leads to life. It's that it's already alive. And we can go further and say that you have an embryo at week 6 and you get the beginnings of whatever facial features become the amalgamation that is you as early as week 9. But that doesn't so much add to the argument, and it's like an appeal to ethos, if anything, if you're looking at different like logical appeals. Shout out to anyone who knows ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, for the sake of this argument, we have to have a point of life, and I'm going to say that we are going to go with murder for this one. If you have a pregnancy and it gets terminated, at any point, it's technically murder, and the moral implications of killing a embryo, of killing a fetus, of killing a zygote will have the same moral implications as it would killing a born child. So that's going to hurt some people, I understand, but facts don't care about your feelings, and we're going to continue with what I'm saying. It's okay. Again, hold off on your comments. Hold off. You'll have more reasons to hate me. Just let me lay out the reasons for you to do these things first. Because again, this is just an opinion, and we're working through logical reasons to do these things. Right? So moving on. We've said enough on pro-life. I was just looking through a little bit of notes. And we're going to move on to pro-choice. Right? And the basis for the moral argument is generally like the same. They say a lot of it comes down to whether or not you're killing, or if it's just a bundle of cells, as lots of people I've heard when they go to like open events, and that's what they're like saying. And while it could be an argument, right, the point that's going to be made, that I'm going to make, that I think is a better argument, is that although the emotions that come from people wanting to make these decisions are technically illogical, the ramifications of these emotions are real. And what I'm going to go into is something that has to do with a little bit more of society. And not to be a little joker on the concept, is because a lot of these problems that we have when it comes to what's deemed as right or wrong come from social constructs. And let me go back in time a little bit, because there's a study done by an anthropologist in a province of Brazil. Sadly, I couldn't find the papers, so I can't actually link it in the description. But even if it's not something you can technically find, you can follow along with a postulate of this type of world, even if you don't believe it actually existed. But there was a province in Brazil that they believed if a child wanted to live, then once it was born, it would need no help in order to do so. Like in modern medicine, if you have a child that gets, let's say, prematurely birthed, then they're put in like a little special box where they have special care for them until they're able to sustain on their own, right? Or they can just need some extra fluids, something small, right? In this Brazilian province, no. If they're birthed and they, for instance, as one doctor put, they said it would just need like a soda, right? Only because it just needed some sugars, water, and technically soda has that. They're being a bit extra, but point is that baby would just die. Because of these types of things, child death, like infant death, was very, very normal in this society. And furthermore, mothers, daughters were pregnant all the time. Just because that's the only way for them to keep up with their rampant, just high infant mortality rate. And they have a completely different outlook on what it means to be like what's right and wrong in terms of the death of a child. So if you have a society that's based on that and they advance to whatever our level is, or they just have these different arguments, are they going to have the same idea for pro-life and pro-choice? Or all these different little bits of semantics, are they going to come to the same fruition for that type of society? And there's a good argument saying that no, they wouldn't. But that's just another side of the argument. And the point that I'm going to link to and focus on is the fact that in our society, the problems that lead to parents wanting to create an abortion are yes, social. Yes, the basis to them is emotional. But again, the reason behind them is not emotional. Or the ramifications in the effects of the emotion are real. And what we're dealing with is like a step above, in this sense. For the objective answer is creating something that is above this. And what I mean is I have to outline the reason or what it means to be objective. And for that, I will go to this little note here, which outlines what the argument will be, which is, to put simply, which conclusion would likely result in happier people on average? What objective answer, right? To be objective is to lead to a net positive society. Which answer is more likely to do that? And for this, the answer is pro-choice, people.
Oh my god! Wow!
I know, crazy. I even made it look like it was kind of like the bit of the opposite earlier, right? But no, I have three main reasons that lead to pro-choice being the objective viewpoint in terms of what we want for society. And number one is simple. Pro-life is just too constricting, right? As a concept, you have little room for external stimuli to affect the outcome, and the whole point where you have the choice in terms of non-consensual situations, that did surprise me when I was doing research, because I didn't think that was part of it, and it weakened my initial standing, right? Because I was looking into trying to find something objective. One of the things I was originally saying it would most likely end up being pro-choice, and I made this argument, and then I learned that, and it was like, maybe it's not the objective choice. Maybe these outlying situations wouldn't align so much with pro-choice and it become more of a pro-life leaning thing. But there's more to things than just consent, though it is extremely important. Always get consent from your partner. Always. Right? But in the terms of this argument, there's more to it that leads to more complicated situations. Finance being a big one. That's not even half of it. But we're going to continue, as the next point is that I kind of touched on this earlier, which is that we're not at all at risk of extinction on the basis of birth rates. And choosing pro-life, well, it's technically a point, right? Because you can't choose pro-choice and ignore it, though you could definitely get away with it. I'm just using it as a point because I brought it up earlier. The whole propagation of the species is not an argument in what we're dealing with, but I'm going to extend this point into the fact that it's a moral dilemma, right? And if we accept that pro-choice is murder, and we are okay with that in order to make everyone else happier, everyone else involved, then you don't have this argument for pro-life so much. Because 90%, this is a total random number, by the way. Everything's objective except for these statistical numbers I'm bringing up in this instance. But a vast majority of the points for pro-life come to the fact that you don't want to kill a baby. No one wants to kill a baby. But like I said earlier, facts don't care about, emotions. And if we're not being emotional in terms of choosing what's net positive overall for people, if they can kill the child and end up in an overall better situation, then that's more objective. Even if it doesn't make sense, I'm sure some of you understand what I'm trying to say. But we still have one more point to cover, and that is the basis for the outline, right? I probably could have shoehorned and changed the definition of what I'm looking for to get something that outlines better for pro-life in this situation. But I feel like what people are overall looking for when they make this argument is what's better for people. What's better for everyone as a whole. So the outline, choosing what's most positive for the species, is an acceptable definition for what it would mean to be objective without losing the core concept of the question. So that's the gist of this. But before we get closing, I was going to make a comment on Roe v Wade, though it's a bit more past now. It's not as much of a buzzword at this point, so I just wrote a little paragraph, and we're going to cover what it means. So, Roe v Wade was a case back in 1973, where Jane Roe, a pregnant woman, was forced to carry a child to term in 1969, and she sued the Texas politician Henry Wade, who enforced the Texas law preventing abortion for any reason that doesn't involve risk to the mother's life. The law in place around the case made it so the rulings behind the legality of abortions were on a national level, which is above general government. Anyways, I step it. Which is to say, per law and constitutional rights, women could get an abortion, and no state could have laws that go against these rights. The abolishment of this law would allow states the right to change that freedom. It does not, imply that they will. Simply, it allows them to. It's the difference between feeding someone a sandwich and saying that the sandwich is available. If there's still confusion, there are many arguments and fears for women's rights debates around this topic, so obviously there are confusion places. Hopefully this clears it up for some people, but I can make an entire another video on this concept alone, and I'll leave a couple links in the description for people to get more informed on the concept if they haven't already. And I'd like to not get too engrossed on this tangent, but again, this removes, or it doesn't remove any current rights, it just changes who holds the power to make the choices. So now it's not a grandiose, all states follow this, it's each state can have their own rights, and you'll have to look into individual laws per state and to see if things change. But anyways, getting back on topic, it's a very heavy topic at that, and we have many more videos that will be covering a lot more light notes, and many people will still disagree on both ends. This one, the other videos, everything else, and hopefully even people that do disagree can make like constructive comments, some nice criticism, or maybe just, send like 5,000 messages all filled with hate. That'd be fine, actually. I wouldn't really mind that. I mean, it's a lot of interaction if you can send 5,000 hate messages. I might even make a video about you specifically. Because dang, that's a lot of energy. Anyways, I've digressed too much. So, given the argument and the outline, this is the best conclusion I could come up with to get objective within this very subjective concept. If you have any debates you'd like to see put through the lens of objectivity, please comment below and I'll see what I can do. But until next time, stay objective.